a lot of people don't realize how important it is on the pre-qualification to ask them how much they want for the home. When they say, we want to hear what you have to say, you gotta push back on that.
Push back.
Can't just be like, okay, that's gonna make the presentation so much harder for you in terms of how to structure your comps in a way where you're able to paint a picture.
Like, hey, just so you know, my intention in asking is not to be nosy. It's certainly not going to influence what the marketplace shows us, we could get for your home, because what something's worth is what somebody's willing to pay for it. It's really just to gauge your expectations. What I find, Jose, is that sometimes, I'm not suggesting this is true for you, when I meet with homeowners, their expectations of what they would like is not in alignment with where the market's at currently. And that causes them to decide to do something different with the home. So it's really just for me to gauge expectation. I'm looking here online, and one of these online sites, they're giving an estimate of about like 1.2. Is that in alignment with you were thinking? And then
Well, I'll kind of share with you where what I do, and then the second layer, because sometimes I'll have 2 or 3 layers. It's very similar to that. The only difference at the end is I'll say, hey, I'm not looking for a pinpoint to exact dollar amount.
Just like a range.
Could you at least give me a range? And the reason I want to do that before I throw out like a Zillow number is I just want to hear because what if they say, well, I'm thinking like 500,000. And then at that point, like at 500,000 is a cash offer deal, it, instead of me saying, hey, look, Zillow's saying that. And then if they push back, then at that point, I'll be like, well, look, like if they say, well, I still want to hear what you have to say, I'll be like, well, look, I'm checking here online, and I just kind of checked the Zillow profile. Zillow says that the property on the low side is 700,000. On the high, or Zillow says that, hey, look, it's 800,000. Is that kind of what you were thinking? Basically the same thing, but I did that in the second layer just to be able to get a number from them first in case there's some other sort of opportunity that I don't want to.
Yeah. That makes sense. Which makes sense because I know you do so much with like the cash offer program, so that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. Now, here's what I want to say, and this was key when we went over this. So at the end of the presentation, or whenever I say, hey, look, where's the marketplace showing us that we would need to be at that would be somewhat reflective of fair market value, or however it is that we say it, sometimes they'll ask you and they'll say, well, we want to hear what you have to say. And that is a trap.
Oh, yeah, it is a trap because they're trying to get you to say something.
So this is what I learned from Aaron, and this was like so good when I learned it. And this is what I did this morning. What I said, well, I appreciate you asking that. And obviously, like right now, what we're doing is we're thinking about it from a seller's perspective. And obviously, as a seller, your goal is to maximize the dollar value of the property. And just so you know, that's my exact goal, to help you maximize the dollar of the property and to help you get as much money as possible. Now, here's what I often find is helpful. Instead of thinking about this from a seller's perspective, if we think about it from a buyer's perspective, if we put our buyer's hat on instead of our seller's hat on, it actually makes it a little bit easier to think about it from that perspective. So let's say that you were buying this property all over again. And let's say that you walk in and you're like, oh my God, I just love the crown molding. I love the baseboard. I love that it's on a cul-de-sac. I love the entertainer's backyard. And you say to me as your agent, Jose, I want to write an offer on the property. And then you say, Jose, what do you think I should offer for the property? And as any good agent would, I would say, well, look, let me show you the comps. Let me show you what is sold and closed most recently. So then I proceed to show you a property that sold at 740, but it sold back in September. That's when it sold. And obviously, I show you the next property that started off at 740, but didn't sell at 740, started off at 725. They didn't sell at 725. They went into escrow when they were listed at 700, which that's a more accurate assessment of where the marketplace is right now. And then they show you one that's sitting at 740 on the market. So honestly, if you were a buyer and you were about to make an offer on the property, what do you think that you would be willing to offer for this home that would be somewhat reflective of fair market value? And then shut up. And this is what happens. And it's so good because what will happen is they'll completely forget that they asked you what you thought about your property. Yep. And they'll say, well, I think I would offer like 700,000. And that's what you want. You want them to say what they would offer for the property versus you telling them, because if they say it, then it's different. Or they may say something like, they'll laugh. They'll be like, we still want to hear what you have to say, Jose. And then at that point you could say, well, I mean,
you could say, then you could break the tension and be like, all right, so do I have permission to be candid, straightforward? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, you're not going to get angry and throw me in the pool. You're not going to get angry and throw me out of the house. And they're like, haha, no. Like, okay, well, having looked at this information, seen what's active on the market, not selling, sold and closed most recently, the marketplace seems to be showing us somewhere around that 700 number seems to be reasonable.
Or you taught me.
I would ask it. Yeah, I would ask it in another way. I would say gosh, I mean, if you were to buy this home, I imagine having looked at this data, you might offer like 700. Do you think you would offer a lot more than 700?
This is the way you taught it to me back in the day. And the way you taught it to me was like having looked at, well, that's a good question. Well, having looked at this information, honestly, would you offer more than $700,000 for the property?
Exactly.
And that's your way of telling them like, hey, look, that's where the value is at. And then they'll very likely be like, no, probably not.
Probably not. And then you say, don't you think most buyers feel pretty similar?
Exactly.
To you? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, okay, good. So I'm in agreement with you. The marketplace is showing us somewhere around 700 seems to be reasonable. Now it just comes down to strategy. Because price is a strategy and attempt to get the most. We'll go over the two strategies that you have because I want you to feel comfortable with the one you end up choosing. Whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%.
And that's key because they're going to ask you, well, like, what do you think that the home is worth? And at that point, well, most agents say, well, look, the marketplace seems to be indicating that right around.
Or even worse, you know what they'll say because they're not trained? I believe, I think, I can get you, which is like the worst.
And then if you say a number that they don't like, guess what's going to happen? They're going to shut down completely. And then at that, it's so hard to re-engage them at that point because they wanted to hear something different, basically.
That's right. And what ends up happening psychologically is they end up anchoring you with what you said.
Yeah. And now they're not able to look at this information. Yeah.
And this example that you gave, Jose, this is really cool because we didn't even plan it that way. This is exactly what happened on that appointment. The other agent, how they presented it, they did not do what we're talking about with a super high degree of probability. They were like, hey, here's all the reasons why it's going to go down. Here's what I think it's worth, and da-da-da-da-da-da. You instead aligned yourself. Yeah, there are homes that have sold for that. Let's take a look at them, right? So we can see what they have to offer. And then we can look at properties that are kind of similar to yours, features and amenities wise, size, square footage, things of that nature. And in doing so, we'll be able to compare apples to apples, and we can see where the market, buyers and sellers, have been agreeing for homes that are similar to yours. Now, before I do that, what I'd like to do is just review some tax records. So that way you're making sure you walk down that whole path. You didn't fall into the trap when they were like, what do you think it's worth, Jose?
Yeah.
You didn't verbally vomit and you walked it down this way. And then when you were like, yeah, I mean, gosh, I'd have to imagine that if you were going to buy this home all over again, you probably wouldn't offer more than 700 having looked at this information, would you? And nah, probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah, don't you think most buyers feel pretty similar to you? Yeah, okay. So we seem to be in agreement. The market is showing us around 700 seems to be reasonable. Now it just comes down to strategy, and then you go down that path.
Yeah. What I got from the agent that he's on my team that I role played with this morning is like I noticed that it wasn't like this huge doom and gloom, like, hey, look, the market, this. It was more like, hey, look, like there are properties that are selling at 740. This is a more recent property. There's a property that's active right now, and that alone paints a very good picture without you having to say very much. Like even going into the market analysis, like they'll stop you in the driver personality. They'll say, hey, Jaime, just tell me what the house is worth, basically.
Yeah, it's going to be bottom line.
It's going to be like, hey, just tell me what the house is worth. And Jaime's been on appointments with me. So I basically regularly take Jaime on appointments with me. And he'll notice that in some cases, I'm like, look, the marketplace seems to indicating that right around 700. Or look, in some cases, I'm even guilty of saying, hey, I believe that we can get right around $700,000 for the property. Now, what I'm also saying is, in some cases, I'll say, well, look, I can like they say, they stop you at the very beginning. Hey, just tell me what the home is worth. Look, I can very easily tell you a number, but here's what's going to happen. The second I tell you what the house is worth, you're going to look at me and you're going to say, well, how did you come up with that number? So instead of me just telling you a number, if you allow me to go through these comps, I promise you very clearly, we're both going to be able to see where the value is at now. And then they'll continue to let me go. Now, if they push back again, I'm just going to be like, hey, look, this is where the value is at. It is. Or if they're an extreme driver, I may just cut to the chase. Extreme.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, and if you know that when you spoke to them and you set the appointment or whatever. So what I would do is I just condense everything. So let's say we sit down and instead of going through like hey, first and foremost, so I meet with you and drivers extremes, they're going to shake your hand firmly. They're going to like that you're on time or early. They're going to like that. Hey, Jose, I like that you're early. Like, you'll know. They'll shake your hand really firm and they're like ready to rock, right? So what I would say is if I felt that and noticed that and perceived that, hey, Jose, you strike me to be a bottom line kind of guy. I'm the exact same way. So our conversation today will be quick and efficient and to the point. What we're going to be covering is, specifically what we could get for the home, what would be top dollar. I'll show you very briefly and quickly some information that will support that, not because I made it up, but because the marketplace is showing us. Then I can answer any questions you may have. If it all makes sense and you feel comfortable and confident, we can take care of the appropriate paperwork because I have it with me. Fair enough? And they're like, yeah, you're speaking their language, right?
Yeah.
So I follow like a similar process. I just condense it because I know that they're that way. And then to your point, Jose, I do the same thing in the price where like, I'm going to give you like, I'm going to acknowledge what you said, and then I'm going to frame it. Then I'm going to give you the message. I'll bring you back. But if you keep pushing after about twice of doing that, then I'm just going to tell you.
I'm just going to cut to the chase, basically. Now, here's what I loved about what you just said about like, hey, look, I'm going to be very concise, very straightforward, very straight to the point. I may even say something like, look, in our phone conversation, you mentioned to me that you wanted right around 750. Just so you know, I'm in perfect agreement with that. I did the homework in advance. 750 is a number that I would feel comfortable putting this property on the market. Would you be okay with that? And they're like, yeah, I would be okay with that. Great. The only other question that I would have for you is, when would you like to come on the market? Well, I'd like to come on the market on this day. Great. I'm in agreement with that. Yeah. Do you have any other questions before we take care of the paperwork? And it's like,
yeah. And then the only other thing, because I would do that, and then sometimes afterwards they bring up commission or anything. So like, you could be like, yeah, do you have any other questions before we take care of the paperwork? But I would also sometimes be like, okay, good. And then the only other question is compensation. Like, are we good with that? And they're like, yeah, we're good. Great. I have the paperwork with me. Let's move forward. Because I've done where I pushed it forward like that. And then they're like, whoa, we start to proceed. And then they want to have this whole conversation and bring me back. You know what I'm saying?
Well, what I'll do in that case, like, let's say that I'm like, great. Like, are you, do you have any other questions before we take care of the paperwork? And they're like, what about the commission? I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm so sorry. I actually forgot to go over that. Like, my most sincere apology. We should have covered that already. Here's my policy on commission. What were you thinking? Great. Blah. Come to an agreement.
I'm in agreement with that. Let's move forward. That's right. Yeah. And what you're describing though, and what we're kind of demonstrating is something that I call like kind of, it's either like prospecting IQ or like sales IQ, where you just have so many reps. I understand the plays. I understand the
like, it's like if
process,
somebody's blitzing.
But I can call a audible. So like, as a quarterback, I was a quarterback in high school, right? So like, if I come up to the line and I see that they're running man-on-man coverage, I may change the play and throw something deep because it's open, right? It's there for the taking, sort of thing. So knowing this inside and out allows you to call audibles if you perceive that it's the right time to do so.
Just so you know,
this is where the pros go to grow, baby.
Yeah, this is probably one question you guys don't want to ask, Aaron. It's just what happened last time we all played football, like in a group setting, like he was quarterback and I was quarterback, two different teams, each playing against each other, buddy. So no high school experience over here, just.
So good, man. I think this is super helpful, super useful. Anybody who wants to geek out on sales, geek out on talk tracks that work, right? Like, we pride ourselves here on not just talking about it, but being about it. And most people teach mindset because they can't teach tactics. We are entering into an environment, not entering, we're already in an environment where tactics matter, where skills make the difference, right? Because when times get tough, only the skill get paid. So keep following, checking in, tuning in, because we will keep delivering what you need skill-wise in order to make money in this market. Let's go, let's grow.
Later.
Peace.